Last time we talked, we sort of broke down why SimCity 2013 maybe doesn't work so well from a game systems perspective. How the game tried to do a lot of things, but none of it with any real success or sense of focus. This time we're going to talk about how SimCity 2013 approaches its subject. What does SimCity 2013 think of cities? What does it do with this big simulation it's built? Well, before we dig into SimCity 2013, maybe it would be beneficial to see how another game tackles the same material. Cities Skylines uses the traditional SimCity residential, commercial, industrial model, where jobs, workers, and produced goods all push and pull on one another. But where SimCity was fascinated primarily with how those raw forces drive city growth, Skylines takes that model and uses it as a basis for examining cities as defined by both their physicality and their public policies. More than SimCity, and certainly more than SimCity 2013, the cities in Skylines exist in a physical space. The flow of water determines where you want to dump your sewage or pull your water out from. You need to make decisions about what directions to expand your city in. Power and water are assumed to only extend so far, requiring investment in extending utilities for long-distance expansions. And bodies of water and mountains force players to build around them. Cities aren't just a big jumble of boxy roads and buildings that create aggregate demand, they're an organism that grows to fit its environment and its resources. It's sort of weird, actually. SimCity 2013 focused a lot on agent traversal of space, even if it was done in kind of a fakey way, but City Skylines focuses on how cities take up space. How the landscape and relative position of things really shape cities over time, how they grow around their environments. And as a result, Skylines feels much more representative of actual cities. You can see it in the sort of cities that the game generates. They feel much more iterative and lend themselves to having new development wrap around old in a way that's organic. And then there are the districts, the ability to further define a city spatially, to demarc areas as individual chunks of a greater whole. And for each district you can set different policies, tax rates, and more. In City Skylines, cities are defined as much by the legislature as by the space they inhabit. They exist physically, but they also exist in policy. The sort of policies that drive life expectancy, or crime rates, quality of life, and more. Where older SimCity games examine how demand for jobs, labor, and goods drive growth, Skylines looks at how the process of growth is controlled by physical space and legislative action. It's a subtle difference, but it feels like the game has carved out its own little niche in the city's simulator pantheon. And I bring up Skylines as a point of comparison because it underscores just how disconnected SimCity 2013 is from almost anything I just mentioned. It's shocking how much space doesn't really matter in SimCity. Interesting topography isn't built around or adapted into your layout so much as it simply takes up real estate in an already small plot of land. In Skylines, expansions to your city feel like they're earned, because it costs a fair bit of money to build a bridge across a river and expand your city and its utilities in that direction. You're committed to growing that way, and it's a decision not easily undone. But because of SimCity's limited size, its cities never feel like that. There's never a sense of risky expansion that costs a lot of money, but grants access to new areas or room to grow anew. Really, the cramped layout leads to cities built entirely on tightly knit grids to maximize city usage, more or less immediately. A layout that makes very little sense for anything other than dense urban populations. It's like you start city planning for a major city before you're even a suburb. Both games problematically fetishize growth and treat it as both inevitable and desirable, but it's only SimCity that seems completely disinterested in small towns. Skylines has room for farm towns and rural lumber villages. SimCity is designed to orient players towards metropolises, asking them to contribute to big Great Works projects, feeding regional demand into local city growth, encouraging city block-style road layouts even at the earliest stages of your city, and offering no farms or engaging small city mechanics. If SimCity has anything to say about cities, part of that message is clearly that bigger is better. Meanwhile, the public policy that drives much of the nuance in City Skylines simply doesn't exist in SimCity. It doesn't worry about public policy at all, really, just tax rates. There aren't any other legislative policies to speak of. You can't adjust funding levels for individual departments, and you can't enact social policies to shape life in your city. It's not interested in stretching the RCI model in any particularly new direction. It's not interested in how resources actually get distributed in cities. The agents, nodes, paths model is too abstract to reflect utilities, and too broken to reflect anything else. And it's not even like the game operates from some presumed set of public policies that are enacted everywhere. Policies are simply a non-entity. So it's not really a city management game, more of a city growth planning game that gives you very little room to expand and expects you to jump straight into building Megacity 1. So if it isn't about the growth patterns or legislation or physicality or administration of a city, what is this game doing? Why does this simulator exist? And thinking about it, I realized it's not really trying to be about the city or its management at all. It's about the content. SimCity 2013 is a content delivery service. That sounds a little weird, but it's not that out there. The idea of a game as content delivery service isn't new. Games like Rock Band and Guitar Hero popularized the idea that a game can exist primarily to sell or experience specific content. Later, Ubisoft would take that idea and merge it with an open world, resulting in a large series of games that are mostly just laundry lists of content to defeat, collect, or unlock. And facilitating that is basically the job that the gameplay in SimCity has been given to do. The content it delivers can be buildings and specializations that are unlocked slowly as you reach milestones. The content can be ads, like the Nissan Leaf charging stations or the Red Cross-sponsored disaster recovery units. It can be the pre-built maps that offer desert scenes or Pacific Islands or Midwestern plains. It can be expansions like the Cities of Tomorrow DLC. It can even be quests and little gameplay segments. The game just has all this stuff it wants you to experience, and the city building system is really just a means of serving it all to you. And I know that sounds kind of vague. I mean, City Skylines also offers up unlocks as you progress through population levels. Isn't that also a content delivery system? And yeah, I guess it kind of is, but the game itself in City Skylines doesn't feel like it exists just to give you content. Like, here's an example. City Skylines offers you ordinances that give you the option to, say, distribute smoke detectors for free. It reduces the risk of fire to your city overall, but the upkeep is 5 cents per building. It suggests the sort of cost-benefit analysis. Do you think your city's fire department can handle it if a fire breaks out? Is the cost to your city's revenue worth the risk of life or damage to property? Maybe you could get away with a fire detector policy in just the districts that are further from firehouses. It's a mechanic that engages the player and gets them thinking about how cities work, and how ordinances like that may impact their own lives. In contrast, SimCity offers you a challenge. Hey dude, we're gonna light off some fireworks and it might start a bunch of fires. Are you okay with that? And then you accept the challenge, and then you defeat it, and you get a reward of money that lets you plop down more buildings and make progress towards other unlocks and other goals. It gamifies city management in ways that don't just feel artificial, but also motivate you primarily through extrinsic rewards. One game offers an examination of how minor policy changes can have a big systemic impact on human life. The other asks you to play a mini-game for a prize that just unlocks more mini-games and mini-systems. It's not interested in the game so much as the prize. It's not interested in the how so much as the what. This emphasis on delivering content, regardless of the form it takes, along with the game's general lack of focus, also explains the weird tone issues the game has. SimCity has always had a sense of humor, but 2013 borders on the outright goofy. The core game was more or less a vanilla city sim, worried about education and utilities and other comparatively dry subjects. But pretty much all of the DLC was weird. SimCity 2013 tried to suggest that airships were a rational way to commute to work. It has superhero DLC that lets you send a superhero for a cost to do the work of medical professionals, firemen, and police. And yes, I realize that these characters originated in SimCity 4, but they feel no less awkward here. It's a city simulator whose sole expansion lets you build cyberpunk dystopias powered by magical gel. It's a game that lets city planners build local amusement parks. Really, they seem to be following the Sims model of content, a base game that offers a sort of middle-of-the-road, clean but whimsical aesthetic, then a whole host of DLC that stretches the premise off into weird places. Which, I guess isn't the worst thing, but there's a reason it works for The Sims and it doesn't work here. The Sims is a game about people and the stories their lives generate. You start from a generic template of possible stories, mostly about what goes on in their home, and DLC moves them out into a wide variety of new optional stories you can tell about pets or day jobs, even if they get a little weird. SimCity is not really a story generation engine. It never was. You can express yourself as you build your city, but the core of the game has always been that RCI model and balancing growth with the utilities and social service obligations that come with it. And instead of engaging with that model and selling DLC that enhances that system, they used it as a platform to push wacky content that lets you tell your own story in a game that was never about telling stories to begin with. When I first went to look at SimCity, I thought it was going to be loaded with assumptions about city management and what success means when building a city. And I guess it is loaded with those sorts of assumptions, but they're all shallow or thoughtless. The longer I looked, the more I realized it didn't have much to say about cities at all. This could have been a gardening sim or a theme park tycoon game, and functioned more or less the same way. And that's really where City Skylines and SimCity 2013 differ. Skylines found a fresh angle to tackle city management from, even if it's strongly rooted in the SimCity tradition. SimCity 2013 found a way to take that tradition and turn it into a platform. Ultimately, I don't think it's a coincidence that the follow-up to SimCity 2013 was the free-to-play SimCity Build It, even if it was made by different developers. The Farmville approach to games is the logical conclusion of games where core systems don't matter so much as serving the player's content.